In our last video, we were talking about creating AIP logic functions and simply how to use them. We touched on basically how do I create a evaluation suite, which is basically a unit test environment to be able to understand how your logic functions are operating. What we want to do now is look at how can I basically start to develop an ontology around this. So far, what we've been doing is sending these as free text parameters into our prompt, but there's going to be a lot of useful information that we want to store and not generate all the time. And possibly we could have some of these things running on automation. So we're going to do that in a second. Basically, I'm going to open the object exploration, object manager, ontology manager application app, and we're going to start developing that. So very simply, I'm just going to create a new object type. And I'm going to continue with our data set actually. So I'm going to save this in a folder for ontology backing datasets. And this would be a user dataset. I'm going to call this So now we have a tutorial user dataset. We're going to put in some very simple values. One of them would be basically the name of the user, the ID, and I'm also going to have the reason why you want to look at some of these companies. And this is something that we're going to pass into the LLM prompts and feed that to get a bit more context as to what we're doing. So I'm going to pause here, develop these properties, and then we'll get back into AIP logic very soon. Yeah, so I've created three properties that are just basically the ID name and another one called motivation, which would basically allow me to input values as to what I'm motivated to look at this particular company. So I'm going to go next. I'm going to leave these defaults. I think they're like the default card operations, create, modify, and delete. And for default groups, I'm just going to select myself, and we're going to create that. Once we have that, I'm just going to save so that we can start to create a few examples and see how that fits into the prompt. So we're going to save that now. Now, once I save, our AIP logic has context into the ontology object and links that we create. So we can basically start to pass it in here. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have another variable aside the company, which is going to make that an object. So I'm going to select the exact object that I did. If it's not here, I'll just probably have to refresh. And we have it here. So I'm just going to call this the user in question. And what's interesting is that we don't necessarily need to write in the specific user motivation. We can have that saved and then continue to use that. So what I'll do is I'll just construct getting the motivation right from within this AIP logic function. And we're just going to use a property block for that. And we have the motivation. And what we're going to do is that once we get a summary of the company, what we're going to do then is that we're going to have another LLM block, right? So this is, I'm going to call this gets company info. And we're going to have another LLM block that then basically finds the intersection between what our motivation is and the company, and then produce a result for us. I'm going to pause here, develop the prompt, and then we just run through an example after putting some values in the object type. So what I've done is that I've seeded the object type with a couple of uses, about 5 in total. We can see them from the object explorer. So you can basically peruse, for example, Aisha and understand her motivation. So if I just click on any of the users right here, we'll be able to understand what their motivation is. Now, coming back to the AIP logic function, I'm just going to put in an example. I'm just going to select Uber. I'm going to select Daniel, and I'm going to run this. Now we realize that the debugger is running, giving us the chain of thought reasoning for each of the LLM prompts, and eventually gives us a final summary. So we see for this example that we have an overall compatibility score of 85% with a few specific areas that it scored on. So career growth, work culture, industry impact, and then also gives some potential misalignment, which is quite interesting. What we can now do is apply evaluation suites on this and compare the results, if we're just chaining all the LLM prompts in one space. But what we've been able to do now is combine the LLM using its public information and also providing some domain specific information that we generated just right in the moment and producing results out of it.